There's rain outside. So I haven't gone out today. It's been like 3 or 4 straight weeks without really talking to anybody or hugging anybody or anything in person for about other than I had one little meeting with a new friend that lasted a few hours. Other than that, it's just been myself. Yeah, I can feel the grief in that. There was a connection that didn't quite make it through, uh, and so that's what I've been coming off the back of for the last few weeks. And why does that matter now? I think it matters that the person was white. So it feels grounding to say that. And so maybe that some of the things I speak into in the moment have some kind of um, quality of relationship to that, without giving away too much detail, because I want to respect privacy and stuff. But what I could share is I felt like the person, somebody who is coming from like a kind of life place that was informed by New Age culture, whether or not they define themselves that way in their current life in this moment or anything. It's a big part of West Coast, spiritual white culture, right? So I think it's worth mentioning. So yeah, there seems to be some grief around that, and also recognition of larger phenomenon around uh, white culture and animism, or indigenous aboriginal culture, depending on how you want to frame it. When I speak into that, my toes get warm. Oh, yeah, and I felt my testicles relax, which is always good. Good sign. Um, I'm just pulling up my notes right now too. Um, so this is a provocative thought. Okay, maybe even to start. Um, that everything in the world and everything in our body has purpose, has function. Even the things that we really dislike as an experience, often, like traumatization, illness, all has purpose. I don't think that is new idea, but the implications of it can be quite challenging. And everything belongs, right? That doesn't mean that like it's not. There are more pleasant ways for certain things to exist in a network. Distribution of size, location, quality, but everything ultimately belongs. So my thoughts around whiteness or white culture, as much as I'm you know the obvious problems with it. And I've been a so-called anti-racist person, or kind of participated in that industry, and I think my paradigm is a lot different, or was always different, and the more I share that, people get more activated. So I tend to stay away now. But um, you know, like racism is a big issue for me. It's like one of the most important issues for me. But how we approach it, right? Well, if we go with everything belongs, um, which is actually a very standard um, tool for exorcism, like a mind tool for exorcism in most animist cultures that I know. Um, when you're doing an exorcism of like a spirit that's plaguing you, which is what things like racism are in the cultural body, right? In the collective body, there's a need to exorcise a certain kind of spirit being. Now, when we say exorcism, we tend to think of it as admonishment or banishing and like disappearance. Um, and this idea that you can destroy anything that there's disappearance is kind of a problem, right? It's an annihilation. It doesn't happen. But what you can do is you can change location, size, quality, quantity. You can reorient something somewhere and understand that's what a lot of uh, what exorcism is about. Now, why is this important in talking about white culture? Um, well, when we're talking about wanting to exorcise whiteness, right? There's something that really becomes really important. It's not just about being kind or compassionate to whiteness. And that's a lot of what people use as a frame, and I think that's actually it's kind of like halfway there. It's not really getting it yet. That's still like I'll be nice to you, maybe you'll be nice to me, kind of weird framing to me. It's certainly, I think, we're invited to be nice to each other, but I think it doesn't get to quite the most penetrating layer. I think that's important and is important here, and that is that whenever a spirit wants to be exorcised, and in the modern frame, we might call that healing trauma, right? It's important to thank the purpose, the function of the thing that has been tormenting us, because everything belongs and is often, in a group psychic sense, the thing that is clinging on and not letting go is doing so because it wants to be seen and acknowledged. It's a very basic principle. So I'm a person that, if you actually see me behave publicly, I have a lot of words to mince, to not mince, sorry, um, about white culture and its behaviors, whether it's enacted by people of color or white people or whatever. Just like white dominant like ways of being, I'm it's pretty obvious and pretty sharp, and I don't really care who is embodying them, even, right? So it could be white people, it could be people of color. I don't really care. Um, so that is true, and that is what we might call what Amy and Arnold Mandel, they do this thing called world work or process work, and what they call in their kind of three layers of reality would be like consensus reality. So I have a body, you have a body, that is a dog, I go to work, all that stuff. just your regular everyday cognitively true reality. And in that reality, I'm pretty sharp with people. um I'm pretty like, stop doing what you're doing. uh that is true, but there are other realities, right? There are other realities than just that consensus reality. So the layer underneath, as Amy and Arnold call it, would be dreamland. So dreamland is a place where you can have sensations, feelings, and thoughts shared in a collective field, and images that rise up from the collective field that um, they kind of like these other beings kind of move towards you and tap into your behavior and nervous system and stuff. It's the second layer. This is often also maybe easily understood as the animist layer. So the animist layer existence is where um, all the ancestors, spirits, and other beings live, right? Jung called that place the collective unconscious, and those beings being the archetypes. Um, in the work that I've done, we've really looked at even, let's say, white supremacy or misogyny as beings, real beings that operate in that dreamland kind of animist realm, right? So that's the second depth layer. And there's a third depth layer. Depth layer we won't go into too much probably, but it's just the energetic layer. So when you break down all the information beings, the intangible beings that live in the animist layer, when you zoom in really close, they break up into small particles of energy, right? Really, really granular, just movements of energy. So when we get really close, there's nothing there. There's energy just moving. That is all. So that's like the deepest layer, and that just kind of everything is mixed into everything. It's what they kind of call the quantum realm, or the world of quantum physics is essentially that kind of realm where particles are everywhere, and like just bizarre shit happens. Okay. Yeah. So why is that important? Right. So, actually, yeah. So the third layer was important. So as much as I'm annoyed in the consensus reality layer with people, um, there's real love that exists in the third depth layer, which is the base one, as far as I know. The energetic layer where everything is everything and all beings are interrelated, or there's no being. There's no being. So I'm gonna actually sit with that. See if you can sense into that place where there's nothing, no thing, no center. And to feel into that layer, it might be helpful to breathe into your belly, because that's your material portal to access that realm. So I do that. Breathe into hara, what Japanese people refer to as the abdomen pelvic center, if you can. So all beings are no beings. There's nothing. That's kind of a state of everything is invited. Everything is everything. And then you can add the animist layer on top. So that was the animatist layer, and then the animist layer. There's all these beings. They're all interrelated. All these ancestors are like in various states of turmoil and joy. Spirits of forests, just idea entities like white supremacy, just like, or love concepts, like everything that is abstract we think that is in our mind or in our psyche is living there. And make sure when you're tapping into that, you're like, oh, well, y'all are also don't exist and are blended into each other completely. So you're all okay, right? You're all okay. And then we add the last layer of consensus reality. It's like, oh, I have a body. And underneath the body, there's this animist layer of dream goo. And underneath the dream goo is just the no center energy world. Woo! So add all these on top of each other. It's like that consensus reality corporeal world where you have this gravitational center in the center of your belly, and then the world of all these intangible beings, and then just the world of just effervescent energy all together, not jumping back and forth, all together at the same time. My toes feel really warm. My head is a little bit buzzy. That's real. And I'm assuming like if this is like too much for you or whatever, you're not doing it, right? It's just invitation. I hope you realize. Everything is just invitation. Try it on, see what happens. No center, totally centered. Everything is interbeing. So, what do we do with white culture? So, I know whiteness, white supremacy, especially inside of that expression, is really fucking annoying. Really, I mean, that's probably the least you can say of it. You know, it's murderous, violent, just, ugh. Yet, or maybe I'm not even done the disgust side. It's so gross to be around. Ugh. Ugh. You can even feel into how gross it is. Yet, it belongs. It's a part of our body's function, white supremacy. You know? On a body level, white supremacy is just extreme dissociation and the results of that when that combines with power. And that happens on a cultural level. And we know that dissociation has a protective quality about it. A lot of the gifts of whiteness comes from that dissociative hyper intellectual state, like the microphone I'm using, the computer I'm using, the house I'm in. All this, a lot of this is product of white culture, and I live comfortably somewhat in that. And this is important. um when people say all lives matter, I mean, it's so boring in a way because it's obvious that all lives matter, right? We can talk about who the people who are saying that and who they are and da, 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 but the general idea that all lives matter is like pretty simple, right? So let's take a twist on that. Or actually, let's even just sit with all lives matter. Like, stop judging the people who are saying it. Just be like, all lives matter. Why? Everything belongs. That's pretty wise, actually. Now, is it always wise to say that? No. Sometimes it's just covert longing behind that word to be seen. It's actually my life matters. I get it. But people, when they say all lives matter, what else do they say? Well, if you hated white people so much, stop typing on your phone. You know? What about all this progress that we've brought? Yeah. What about it? We're apparently complaining about white culture while we were complaining about it on the thing that white culture gave us. So let's listen to the dream body. The consensus reality is annoying as fuck, right? And consensus reality is super fucking annoying. Not even annoying, murderous. Let's be real. I mean, as a hashtag, it's annoying because it's just on your phone and you're like, ugh. Like it's not the thing that's killing you in the moment. But the consequences of that as a larger phenomenon, yeah, it's fucking violent as all hell, right? But that's consensus reality. There's more than a few realities. And diving into the second one does not make the consensus reality go away. And that's where people get really fucked up. It's like, no. You can dive into the other realms. The other realms don't disappear. Don't be silly, right? So you can dive into the dream realm, and you probably hear, it's like, oh, all these voices, ancestors, beings, just wanting to be heard. We've done some good things for you. It's like the parent is like, I know I was bad to you, but I put food on your kitchen, on the table, and you've eaten it. The clothes on your back, I bought it or wove it even, maybe, or created the factory that it came from. Right? So you can feel the dream body. Feel it. And then love from the etheric animatist body where everything's just energy. Well, this thing that's coming at me and saying, look at me, it's just a part of me that I don't realize that it is, but it is a part of my system. Or it is part of a system that I am a part of, that I also am. This gets a little bit more complicated. They all exist together, right? But all the layers exist together. All the layers exist together, right? So let's sit in appreciation. Be like, yeah, fuck yeah. I love my laptop. I love my microphone. I love the very thing that I annoyingly jab at white people with every day and be like, complain about them. Wonderful. That's consensus reality, animist reality, animatist reality, all clashing together. If I can find a bit of love, and I don't mean that like Christian, like imperialist thing. It's like, no, it's just like, oh yeah, you belong. It's just love is a way to maybe put some kind of some kind of somatic description of how it feels to see that everything belongs. And I think it should really, I mean, my somatic imprint of it is like kind of in my center line and rooted from my belly through my genitals up to the crown. It's not like this heart palpitation like meeting my long lost child thing. That's not what it is. If you're feeling that, you probably want to check yourself a little bit. Brush your energy down. It's not your long lost child. No, everything belongs. So yeah, everything fucking belongs. All lives matter. Right. Well, actually, you might say all memes matter, right? Memes are just packets of information as entities, right? Memetics, the idea that packets of information ride on us, that we are carriers, just like our bodies are carriers for genes, for genetic information. Rather than thinking the human organism is the one who's leading, think, oh, the genes are looking for a suitable carrier, which is our organism. Memes are similar. They're packets of information that our nervous system is a carrier for. Yep. So all memes matter. All lives matter matters. Black lives matter matters. They all belong. Yet, wisdom is choosing when things poke their head out and get to be seen. Because in the animist layer, all these memes exist, and they always just want to be seen all the time. And our grace as human beings is knowing when should which meme pop their head. So you don't go to a rally about police violence towards black folks and do this all lives matter thing. It's just not the time and place. Now, that doesn't mean there's never a time and place for all lives matter. That's also actually absurd, right? It's what you call mimetic competition, because now Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter are duking it out for real estate in our minds. And they're both probably in kind of vigilant scenarios where they're really fighting over territory. It's like a scarcity paradigm. And it makes sense because those ideas were born in vigilant states, both of them, right? I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying what's happening. So there needs to be some reconciliation. Everything belongs. It's just a matter of where. And also caveat that everything belongs and also everything dies. So all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, they're going to die. Or they're going to change form. Or when they die, they become an ancestor, right? Does that make sense? There's a certain point at which ideas are no longer alive, in a sense, or less alive. Or they are alive, but as ancestors. They've been succeeded in the utmost surface cognitive awareness. Right. So I often talk about intersectional feminism being dead. But, people often go oh, no, you're murdering. It's no. It's like an ancestor if you chill out. And ancestors, have done shitty things and have done good things. Relax. That's all it is. Death is, when you say oh, something is dead and people are get up in arms, it's well, there's a little bit of what do you think is death? Death phobia. Death rules everything. Fear of death rules everything around me. Dream. Fear of being in parentheses. Death rules everything around me. Dream. Obviously, a Wu-Tang Clan reference. Okay. So yeah. So all this brings me back to my grief, which is multiple people's grief. And to talk about this new age culture that is couched in whiteness, quote unquote. Well, if you want to move the thing, shrink the thing, you want to kill the thing and make an ancestor or whatever, you want to reorient, and you want cooperation, You have to appreciate why it's come to be, or appreciate some of its functions, right? Uh, Toru Abo, who's a Japanese immunologist who passed away recently, I think, or wrote a lot about cancer. And one of his great, I thought was amazing, like very like, oh yeah, Asian allopathic medicine kind of hybrid, super cool. He was like, tumors are just second livers that develop because the organism cannot filter its own bloodstream. There's too much toxicity. So the organism develops a tumor to help contain the toxicity, right? So when your nervous system's hyperactivated and your intestinal wall is not able to filter food properly, and there's all this toxins leaking to the bloodstream, and the liver can't deal with it, tumors develop to absorb toxins. This is kind of his modeling. So he said essentially, like, the tumor is actually the thing that helps you live longer. If you didn't get a tumor, you would die earlier. I think it's very compelling. Very compelling. So, a lot of the things that we despise are like that, or all of them are like that. And in some ways, I'm trying to figure out, well, what is this white culture thing that it's so hip and fashionable to hate on? How do we deal? And especially within my own community, how do you deal with the new age thing? The cultural appropriation and all that shit, right? How do we square with that? And I say this because I get pretty close, just because of where I live in so-called Vancouver, BC. Like, it's the capital of colonialism in Canada. It's called British Columbus, and the capital is Victoria. It's like a disaster. It's like a triple colonial whammy here. How do we deal? And like, it's a historic kind of hippie haven. So this new age culture is really big out here. How do we square? How do I square? And I thought of it today. I just thought of it while I was ordering Chinese food and going, and I was thinking about love and, romance. And I'm like, how do I square with this thing? And it kind of dawned on me as a possibility that white culture is such a void, right, in terms of animism. And when we're talking white culture, I think even white modernist culture, right, is such a void. There's a nothing. It creates a void. It creates a void of understanding of the animist and animatist realms, right? But what did white culture do? It connected the world really, really rapidly. The colonial project just interconnected the world in a crazy way, crazy fast, right? Including its communication technology and its travel technology, right? And there's a void. There's a nothing. There's this lack of spiritual information, right? That's why, like, and then like the field of psychology is from Freud and Jung and all those daddies. Like, it's a major way to deal with that void and looking back into looking into the animist and animatist realms from the mind, from the westernized kind of like shit dissociated place, looking in. And this is the thing I thought of today, is like, because there is a void, it actually brings everything in. I was like, wait a second. Is in some weird way, is New Age culture creating a template for all these animist cultures? It's like the table that you play the puzzle game on. It's like the void that invites everything into itself, and it turns into a mix. There's this mixturing that happens. That's kind of an exciting way to think about whiteness, isn't it? It's like the void that allows everything to exist within it to come together. You know? Um, Pretty interesting thought to me. It's like, oh, that's an interesting function. And I can see a lot of the people in my life. I wouldn't necessarily say benefit, because benefit is hard to frame always, but have experienced that. Like they've come through that. They come through this hybridization, of these animist cultures within them, from Europe to Africa to Asia to the Americas, so-called, like whatever, pulling all these animist and animatist wisdoms, weaving them in together very quickly, hyper fusing. And that's part of the template of whiteness. And of course, that's not the only place mixture happens, right? But it's also true. It's a place where, like, you look at like a Carlos Santana album cover. It's like wild, the imagery, right? Wild. Let's I'm gonna pull up Santana. Which album cover is that? Arabax. It's like, it's it's like kind of crazy. Let's see the images. Album cover. Let's see. Abraxas. I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I think there's like angels. There's like a black mother figure. Like it's like a hybrid of. There's like, I don't even want to say. There's like there's just like spiritual beings from every land, just like on this album cover, and that's like kind of like part of this modern culture. Even if white people aren't directly involved, it's still the technology and the communication travel technology is bringing all this together, right? And of course, like all cultures that have been hybrid, but the intensity and the saturation and the quickness is different. And of course, we can definitely argue how violent all that is too. But you see, on the first podcast that I did, I talked about an indigenous elder saying that a long time ago, they said maybe 6,000 years ago, there was this thing that they called the internet. So it's inside net. And all the world's elders were like, there is a time period of hyper masculine coming. And that's not just about gender, it's about race, it's about capitalism, it's about everything. It's just too much yang energy is coming. And we need to protect the teachings. So every community in the world keeps a holographic piece of the full description of animatist culture, right? And I think you kind of said we are in a time right now. All the people are coming back together again with their holographic pieces to look at the whole, to reproduce the whole picture. That's interesting, right? Because this hyper-masculine imperialist quality that started 6,000 years ago, that is definitely the template of whiteness or white culture that we live with. White supremacy, that's an outgrowth of it. And yet, within the communication and the travel technology that white supremacy has produced, or white culture has produced. Supremacy, white culture, it's like a little bit interchangeable, also different flavors, right? Different intonation. But notice, the holograms are coming together also because of this, possibly. Is that good or bad? The process? I don't know. And this is the place where I think, the more and more we think about what healing is, quote unquote, and I'm apparently a healing practitioner, I have less idea what it means, because I am just a being swimming in this cultural body with 3 layers that are just doing different things. What is healing? I don't know. I think it changes in any given moment. It's just the thing that is happening, even. And I get to notice it. And when I notice it, something happens. So I think this is all that weird. This is all that weird. But I feel blessed today just to even to say, like, oh, I think part of the thing that in a way, like, creates this divide between, I was thinking it creates this divide, this whiteness thing creates this divide between me and people around me. It's like, but Tada, also, if you pay attention on a different layer, it's what might bring you together. It creates the interface of togetherness, right? Ooh, such a naughty thought. Such a naughty thought. Mm. And then bizarrely, I feel the spirit of whiteness being happy with me would be like a child right now. Be like, you saw me. I'm like, I found you. You know, and it's true in that consensus reality, there's a lot of death and violence, right? Or painful death, right? Death that we wish wouldn't happen. So it's all true. And there's a moment of grieving and being in that consensus reality, and the pain of that and the anger. And then there's the other realms where something else is happening. There's joy, even paradox, what cannot be expected. And we are conduits for all these worlds to play together. And I can feel this in my balls, because there's been a lot of conversation around around anti-Asian sentiment. And we've seen, again, some of the results of that. I haven't spoken much about my feelings about it in public, because that's not always something that I do. But yeah, I'm gonna read the folks' names. Because I think how do I read their names? I read their names trying to find a full list. So when I read their names, my understanding is that Their names themselves is a doorway into the whole matrices of relationships. So people are more than their individual selves. They are their ancestors, their spirits, the spirit of sex work, the spirit of Asian, the spirit of white folks, um, you know, Latino folks. I think there was a person who was killed who was Latinx and more. The folks, black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks grieving together. Like all of that matrix, all of the matrix, and indigenous folks. I think I forgot if I named. I mean, even the naming thing is one thing because you can never name all the things. So I'm gonna not be perfectionistic about that. So offer the names, the folks who passed in Atlanta at the spa shootings. Here we go. And yeah, may they feel the joy of the various realms, the animatist, the animist, the layers unseen that they are living in now. May we send joy to them, and may they receive, and may they say joy to us. So, Hyun Jung Grant. Xiaojie Tan. I could be mispronouncing these names quite a bit, just to be real. Delina Ashley Young. Paul Andre Michaels. LCS Hernandez Ortiz. Young Ai Yue. Suncha Kim. Soon Chung Park. Dao Yo Feng. Yeah. The world is a very psychedelic place. And I can see the spirit of whiteness kind of grieving in the corner with me. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you should be sorry. But you're also a great being in some ways. Very powerful being. I give you that. And you know what? I'm gonna be a good parent. Say you're a great being. That makes my gut feel good. I'm on camera telling whiteness that they're a great being. Cancel me now, I guess. But even it's an odd thing because when the consensus reality is shit, sometimes the most urgent thing is to dig into the other realms and find affection there.